This podcast looks at the question, describe the importance of Kristallnacht, Night of the Broken Glass, November 1938. It was taken from the January 2012 paper. It's worth 9 marks and candidates would have about 13 minutes to write an answer to this. So again, any question that carries 9 marks worth 13 minutes would need to be a paragraphed answer with a clear introduction, 2 or 3 distinct paragraphs and a conclusion. So how would we tackle this? Well, the first thing is candidates will often, all they will see is the word Kristallnacht and think, well, all I've got to do is describe what happened on Kristallnacht, on that particular night. In a moment we'll look at the Chief Examiner's report that very clearly points out that candidates who achieve level 2, which is equivalent to a grade C, make that mistake. They simply write a narrative of the events of that night. They stay in their comfort zone, so to speak. Actually, the key word is the importance of. So the question is actually saying what happened as a result of Kristallnacht, what changed. So the question is about the concept of change. And if you're going to talk about change in history, you've obviously got to talk about what happened before, where Kristallnacht fit in the timeline, and what happened afterwards. So if I were planning this, I would very much sort of have the following timeline in my mind. Kristallnacht, as we know, was in 1938. So if I just put 1938 on that timeline, and it's obviously a key event in terms of Jewish policy. Now, this is something we've covered in our revision session, but if you try to imagine it as a form of line, Jewish policy from 1933 to about 1935 gradually got worse. It was the period of discriminatory laws, but then in 1936 it went quiet, the so-called Olympic Games, the so-called quiet years, and so you could almost sort of see measures against the Jews flattening off. So as a timeline of the actions that the Nazis were taking against the Jews up to 1938, that is the shape of the line. Now, what then happened in November 1938 was Kristallnacht, and basically what happened with Kristallnacht, from that point onwards, measures against the Jews got steadily worse and worse. It's what we call radicalisation. Policies became more extreme. And that is the importance of Kristallnacht. Now, from 1939 onwards, of course, 1939, World War II began. That line just got steadily steeper and steeper and steeper. And of course, that was the period leading to the Holocaust in World War II. So we've got a clear turning point in 1938, November 1938, with Kristallnacht, and I think that's a key word you want to put across in your answer, that 1938 was a turning point. So the focus of your answer is about change. So let's take a look at the plan, how I would actually tackle this. Okay, so we have an introduction, and again, if you look at the introduction, the whole purpose of an introduction, the very first paragraph, is it puts the event into context. So you don't just launch in and talk about what Kristallnacht was and what happened, you talk about what was happening before. So you talk about the years 33 to 35, where there were discriminatory laws. You mention the quiet years of 36 to 38, and then you say what happened on the 9th of November was the beginning of a wave of violence that would continue beyond that. So you're clearly setting it up as a significant point in Jewish policy. You then move into the remaining paragraphs. Now, as you can see from this plan, there are 5 key areas I would develop. They only need to be brief paragraphs. The main points are your topic sentences, and develop them with as much detail as you can in the time that you have, but remember getting the pacing right. The important thing is in the time you have is to make these points, paragraphs 2, 3, 4 and 5. So your first point, Kristallnacht was important because it was a turning point, so there's that key word. It's the first time that there was actual government-led violence against the Jews. Before 1938, Jews were discriminated against, but in a non-violent way. So develop that point, and again give precise information so you can mention the 191 synagogues that were destroyed, Jewish businesses destroyed, 76 Jews killed, etc., etc. So it was a turning point. Your next paragraph after that, again, it was important because, remember that's the question, it was important because it was the first time Jews were put into concentration camps because of their race, purely because of the fact they were Jews. Before 1938, Jews who were communists and socialists were put into concentration camps, but you weren't put into a concentration camp just because you were Jewish. But now, after Kristallnacht, 20,000 Jews were thrown into concentration camps. So that clearly was a turning point. The next point, paragraph 4, again, a key change, the immediate consequence. Okay, so you're looking at immediately what happened as an immediate outcome of Kristallnacht. Was that Jews were not allowed to run their own businesses and trade. Focus on the law of the 12th of November 1938. The decree that banned Jews from German economic life. If you can learn the name of that decree, that will really impress an examiner. And then finally, paragraph 5, you start focusing on some of the longer term consequences. I think a key point here is that it shocked and frightened many ordinary Germans. Before 1938, many Germans had supported Nazi anti-Semitic laws because they were seen to be moderate and legal and non-violent. But all the evidences of eyewitnesses shows that many Germans did not support the violence, and that they were genuinely shocked by what they saw on the 9th of November 1938. So it was a turning point in the sense that it changed public opinion in Germany of the Nazi regime. Many people who perhaps had supported Hitler before 1938 now had doubts about Hitler. And then finally, your conclusion, revisit that word turning point. That is the key word that you need to bring into your answer. A sudden change of direction, and pull together those threads that you've developed in your main answer. So quite a lot to pack in there in 13 minutes, a lot to say. Finally, a quick look at the scheme. As you can see here with the mark scheme, hopefully none of you will be writing a level 1. Simple detail. Shops were smashed up, Jews had to pay for the damage. That will get a grade D or below. Level 2, which would be really a grade C, possibly pushing into a grade B. This is the answer that describes or narrates. It simply tells the story. It may imply the importance, but it doesn't explicitly state what the importance was. So it would be a story of the events, and it may describe the immediate after effects, but it doesn't really analyse the after effects, whereas a top answer will include that information, but it will shape that information to answer the question. So it will describe Kristallnacht, but it will focus in on the importance of it, so the type of answer which I've just given to you. And again, you can see the examples there. The immediate response, the damage, and the decrees that resulted in, particularly the 12th of November, the decree that excluded Jews from the economic life of the nation. We then have a look at the Chief Examiner's report, and again focusing in on the top half here, which focuses on level 3. Remember, you want to get level 3. Why are level 3 candidate answers good? It clearly says it focuses on the immediate impact on German Jews, how it marked a significant stage in other words, a turning point, a change. The impact on the economic livelihood. So there's that reference to the 12th of November decree, but also as a result of that, many Jews emigrating from Germany. There's that word turning point. Okay, state-sanctioned violence. It was the first time there was actual government violence against the Jews. And then here it talks about the weaker answers. The weaker answers were descriptive. They'd simply told a story, a narrative. They didn't recognise the importance of that word importance. So the Chief Examiner's report is very useful. Also in the Chief Examiner's report, the answer. And again, very useful. This it's not as good an answer as the one I have just shaped for you, and yet this was actually cited as an answer that got full marks. It got the full 9 out of 9. So again, if you read through that answer, you will see that it really does hit those points. It focuses in on the importance. It talks about the outcomes. It talks about excluding Jews from the economy as a result of Kristallnacht. It's not just about the violence of the events, and it even goes so far and it talks about how the violence continued into World War II, talking about the Einsatzgruppen and the violence leading ultimately to the final solution. The answer continues and finishes there on the final page. So that's a fairly detailed explanation of how to answer what may appear on the surface to be a simple question, but watch out for that word importance. Okay, and that's how you would approach that question.